Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the Discover the Power of Open Text Process Automation webinar. My name is Neha Jha, and my colleague Nicholas King and I will be hosting today's session. I'm the Product Marketing Manager, while Nick is the Senior Director of the Product Management team. Before we begin, I want to inform you that as part of our company's rebranding efforts, Appworks has been renamed to OpenText Process Automation. I would now like to cover a few housekeeping items. You'll notice on your console window, there are multiple engagement windows. All the windows are movable and resizable, so feel free to move them around and get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. We encourage you to ask questions during the webinar, which you can submit through the Ask a Question box. We'll have a live Q&A at the end of webinar. Please know, we do capture all questions, so if we run out of time, we'll answer your questions later via email. For the best viewing experience, we encourage you to use a high-speed and stable internet connection and close any programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause issues. Events are bandwidth intensive, so closing any unnecessary browser tabs and logging off VPN will help conserve your bandwidth. If your slides are behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. You can find additional answers to common technical issues in the help tool at the bottom of your screen. A recording of the event will be available after the event concludes and can be accessed using the same audience link sent to you earlier. Let's take a quick look at the agenda. We will be covering topics like bidirectional meta-sync, connectors for enterprise information system, that is EIS, RPA, and similar topics that eliminate information fragmentation in cross-departmental long-running processes. Today, we'll discuss how to alleviate a knowledge worker's challenges by providing accessible information and eliminating information fragmentation. According to APQC, only 21% of respondents say real-time internal and external data is easily accessible. Imagine the loss in productivity when workers manually hunt for the data they need. Another survey by AIM reveals that only 26% of document, content, and records management systems integrate with other core applications. This lack of integration means cross-departmental processes often suffer from inconsistent information across systems. As a result, workers must search through each application separately to find accurate information. In fact, APQC reports that 20% of a knowledge worker's week is wasted searching for recreating and duplicating information, which means they want to be good on the go, but information silos is getting in their way, which also means, in other words, that an entire business day is wasted in a 5-day work week schedule. What if we could improve the life of a knowledge worker by enhancing their productivity and job satisfaction? Today, we'll explore methods to eliminate data silos, boosting collaboration among distributed teams, and improving overall organization performance. Now I'll hand it over to Nick, who will dive into how syncing processes with the document management system can further streamline operations.
Thanks a lot, Neha. Yeah, so as Neha said, I'm going to take you through just some of the key ways that Appworks can integrate with the existing data in your business and talk through why that's important and how we make it easy to do that in a low-code environment. So the first of those is synchronizing metadata. So if you're using our content management platform, then you'll know that it's possible to synchronize data from a leading business application like SAP into what we call a business workspace. So formerly called Extended ECM, obviously our content management platform. So with Appworks, we can extend that further. So we take that knowledge, that concept of a business workspace that is embedded inside your leading application, and we can embed exactly the same workspace in your process automation screen as well. So we can then configure two-way synchronization so that the metadata gets pulled through directly into the process automation properties around your business objects that you're working in a workflow with. And we can then push changes from that back in. So it allows you to use the process automation user interface as your kind of your workflow case management interface, and you're synchronizing and sharing that information across all three systems essentially. So it's a really good way of just seamlessly accessing and interacting with that metadata. And there are some metadata that you might just want to pull and not push back, and then there's some that you might want to be able to edit inside the process automation user interface and push back. And obviously, because we're using that business workspace across all of these applications, it's the same workspace, it's embedded in the applications. That means if you upload documents in one of the interfaces, you see them in any of the other interfaces. That's a really good way of building these content-centric applications, these process applications, but really integrated into your leading system like SAP or Salesforce, for example. So how do you do that? The value is clear. How do you actually make that happen? So it's very straightforward. If you're using OpenText Content Management or OpenText Core Content Management, the public cloud version, you can configure that workspace can be available externally. In Appworks, in process automation, we add the building block called the business workspace building block. And that essentially gives us access then to all the properties that are configured in that business workspace. So you'll see over on the right, I can choose which properties I want to synchronize. So in the screen over here, I've selected city, customer name, customer number, and industry. And so those will be synchronized between content management workspace and Appworks, and then consequentially with the leading application. So that's really simple to configure. There's some configuration to do on the content management interface, but it's pretty straightforward. And if you want to also pull things through, the typical example would be that a customer workspace already exists in SAP. And if you're starting off a new workflow, maybe it's a case because some goods were missing in an order and you want to create a case in Appworks to investigate where the goods went, then that customer workspace already exists. And in that case, we allow you to actually link to an existing workspace. And there's some more configuration you can do here in the administration interface of process automation, where you can configure how to find that workspace and link it. And if it's an existing workspace, then again, here we can define which properties we want to pull from the existing workspace over. So there's two places to do some configuration to map these properties. But so very straightforward, all low-code configuration, and you get that out of the box in two-way synchronization between your leading system, the content management system, and the process automation application. So very straightforward to configure that. The next thing that we allow you to do in terms of integrating with data is what we call the Enterprise Information System Connector, the ICE connector. And so this is really powerful because often, although we can define a data model inside the process automation application, often information already exists in maybe a banking system or an HR system or anything, a database that you're using for maybe master data management. And so how do you access that information and make it part of your low-code development environment? So obviously most systems have APIs, and so yes, you can write custom code to connect to that. But how do you use that, and how do you get the most value from it? So our ICE framework is really powerful. It allows you to access external data as if it was a native entity of the process automation platform. So you can create these call them ICE entities, external entities, and create relationships to them and add building blocks to them to add functionality to them, even though the data doesn't live inside the process automation kind of sphere. There's two ways of building those. You can start from either an open API spec. If you have an open API spec for that system and it has a REST API, then you can very easily low-code way, I'll show you some screenshots of how you do that, connect to that data and treat it as if it was an Appworks data object. Or if it's not got an open API spec, or it's got some unusual API. I remember I built a connector for a proof of concept once to something that had it was an XML RPC API to this platform. And so what we do then with the ICE connector is generate the stub code, the framework code, which allows you to then just write your own implementation for all of the CRUD operations, the create, read, update, and delete operations. So it makes it easy to write. It's custom code writing in Java, but we provide this interface and a framework for doing it. But the key thing is that data in that external system is still treated as if it was part of Appworks. So you can read that data, if you're allowed to and you want to allow it, update that data in the other system from within Appworks. So again, you get this full two-way, full access to external data. It does typically utilize a service account within those sorts of operations. But the nice thing is that you can externalize all of the configuration properties for that system. So URL or service account details can all be externalized. And I'll show you a couple of screenshots just to show you how easy this is. So if you have got an open API spec, it's a simple case of creating an ICE connector in Appworks. You fill out the connection properties here and the authentication details that you need. And you say generate API. All of the artifacts. So behind the scenes, it still generates Java code, but we generate it for you. And it adds the relevant artifacts to your project. You do need to, and this is one of the most technical things you might have to do, is download some jar files from typically the Maven sort of repository. And the screen here showing you on the right tells you what jar files to download. So these are just the dependencies that it needs to operate. So you download these jar files, upload them into your artifacts, your archives folder in your project, and you set up the dependencies to those jar files. It's very simple. Again, low-code configuration. Takes a couple of minutes to do that bit, and you can publish it. And then the next step is you consume it. You see here all the properties. Here we're seeing the URL and the connection properties. They're all externalized. So when you deploy it into a dev environment or a pre-prod environment, you can set these accordingly for that environment. So you don't need to change the code at all. And when you've deployed it in your project, you then say you want to create you configure here the system resource manager, an instance of the ICE connector, and you deploy it. And then in your project, you say, I want to use this ICE connector, and it allows you to then load those entities. And you'll see here on the screen, we've loaded the entities from the external system, and it's come back with a list of employee, address, customer. And I've selected the address and the student because I know there's a relationship between those two things. And it allows you, with no coding, to go and select which entities you want to use, which properties you want to pull across from that system, what the primary key is, the unique identifier, what operations do you want to allow update, do you want to allow delete, for example. And so you choose which features you want to support, and you say synchronize. And then in your actual project, those become entities. So you'll see here on the screen that we've got two entities now in our project, address and student, and they're just like entities that I've created inside Appworks as what we call native entities. So these entities, I can now add building blocks. There is a limited list. There are certain features that we don't support, like we can't add content to one of these. But yeah, you see here we can add UI elements, so I can create a form on top of my student now in Appworks, but the data in the form is coming from the external system. We don't duplicate it, we're not replicating it, we're not caching it. It's a live connection to that external system. And if I've supported update, then in my form, if I change a property in the form, then that updates in the external system. So it's a really powerful way of interacting with external data as if it was part of your native Appworks environment. You'll see I can add security on here. I can build rules around these external entities. I can add case models, a life cycle, activity flows. I can add the history building block on here. I can add email functionality to send and receive email. So it's very powerful. It's almost all the same building blocks as a regular entity. But obviously you can still create relationships to these things. And so it's very easy to, if you wanted to add content into this now, you basically add a relationship from a native entity to your ICE entity. And you'll see here on the right, on the form, I can now drag in, as well as the content building block, I can use that now on my native entity. I can pull in properties from the related external entity and still treat it as if it was one of my own. So it's a very powerful way of integrating. Now, I said that there's two ways. This is the low-code, fully low-code way. And if you do have an external system that doesn't have a standard open API spec for it already, then it's the same configuration at the start when you generate the API in this instance. So what we do is generate stub Java code. And you'll see on the right, it's all set up and configured for you. You just have to fill in the implementation for the create operation, the list operation, etc., using that external systems API. So whether that's a web service API or whatever it might be. So it also allows you, if you wanted to connect and do some special things, if you wanted to cache data, for example, in case the external system goes offline, then you could build a caching mechanism into here. So it's a very good way of building external integrations. So that's the ICE framework. Obviously, REST is kind of the standard now, the de facto standard for system integration. And so yes, Appworks supports working with REST APIs, although the platform, historically, when Appworks was first built, process automation was first built, it was based on an XML web service architecture. And that hasn't changed. It's still a very powerful, very scalable, really robust architecture. But obviously REST is now the standard. And so we support REST in two ways. So we expose almost everything in Appworks now that you build, that you configure as a REST API. So when you create your application, you model your data model and your forms and your lists and your rules and your relationships, and you add the content building block, and you add the maybe history and the discussion building blocks and things. We generate REST APIs. And we also support consuming REST APIs from external systems. So as well as the ICE framework, we have an HTTP connector that allows you very easily to configure endpoints and implementations for the calls to those REST APIs. And then what that does is that turns that into a web service API for the platform that you can then use in business processes typically. So if you wanted to call an external system that has a REST API from our workflow, which is essentially web service based, the HTTP connector handles the translation of the messages and the XML to JSON and vice versa. So again, it's slightly technical to configure it. First time you do it, one analyst, I remember, has a phrase when he talks about low-code tools that often you get to a point where it's like falling off a cliff. This is probably the one place in Appworks where you might fall off a cliff. So, but it's once you've done it the first time, it's really, it actually makes a lot of sense and it's very easy to use. So what do these things look like? So I said that when we configure an application, we generate a REST API, and that's a really important point. It's a typed REST API. So you can access it by logging on to the runtime administration user interface. You see the list of applications that you've got configured. You click on the settings icon on the top. You can choose REST API, and it takes you to the Swagger page, the Open API spec page. It's fully interactive. You can try out the calls. So it's a really nice way of understanding the APIs. Key thing is it's a typed API. So my example I've got here is an Acme claim management app. I've configured a claim entity in the application. And so what I get here is an API on the claim entity to post, to create, to get, to retrieve, to put, to update. And the key thing here is that that API is based on the configuration. So the put operation supports in the payload all of the properties I've added. If I go in and I add a new property and I republish, my REST API is updated to include that new property. So it's a very specific API for your application. And as I say, if you add the content building block, then your REST API has operations to upload content and download content, etc. So it's a very powerful way of integrating process automation into your external system through REST. The other thing is consuming external REST API. So if you have another system that has a REST API and you want to use it, then you follow these steps. So it's set up as a connector. So Appworks, keep calling it Appworks Process Automation, formerly called Appworks, is based around a connector architecture and a service-oriented architecture. So you configure and enable the HTTP connector service container. You go in and configure it. You have to configure, we have an XML store where we store definitions. You create an XML file in that store. And inside that, you basically list your endpoints. So you'll see on the right, it's just a small XML file that lists an endpoint called pets, and the URL is pet store. It's the classic Swagger pet store API. And so that's my endpoint. And you can configure multiple endpoints in that one XML file. And once you've done that, you can then go in and create web service definitions. So it's a type of artifact you add to your project, and you add methods to the web service definition. And the implementation you'll see in the middle screenshot, maybe it's a bit small, but it's an XML definition, and you select the connection, the URL that you just added in the other file. The method is a get, a put. You add in details of the request, and if you want parameters, you can define parameters in here. And then once you configure that and you save it, and you can then right click and you can say test it, and then you can go and check that it's a web service call, but it gets turned into a REST call to that external system. So again, it doesn't, the first time it probably will take you 10 minutes. On the second time, it will take you 2 minutes to configure. It's very straightforward to call external REST APIs. And that means then from a business workflow, business process, you can call an external system to retrieve data, use that data in a workflow, or if you want to update an external system through its REST API as part of a process, at the end of an approval process, you can go and you call an update REST API into that external system. So it makes it very easy to work with the REST APIs. The next topic I wanted to touch on is RPA, so robotic process automation. So we've had support for RPA for quite some time now in process automation, and it really solves that problem of integrating with systems that don't have a standard API. So if you don't have a REST API or a web service API, or in some cases, maybe the API, there is an API, but you're not allowed to use it because of IT concerns about opening up access through a service account to another system. But it allows, so RPA allows you to integrate with another system just by using desktop automation, obviously. So we have a generic connector that today supports UiPath and our own core automation center. So what it does is it abstracts out the connection so that in your Appworks solution, your process automation solution, it's a call to an RPA system, and then the connector handles which RPA system you're connecting to. It's not deployed by default because it's not a standard feature that everybody wants to use. Not everybody is using RPA in their business, but it's easy enough to deploy it. It also does expose a REST endpoint of its own REST call, so that the external RPA tool can then call our REST API to pass back data to signal when the robot is finished. If you're interested in this, but you've got interest in another RPA tool like Automation Anywhere, then let us know, and we can always plan to add support for more RPA tools in the future. And what it gives you once you've deployed it is, as well as the generic connector, it gives you a new BPM activity or a setting in the process activity to call a robot. So what does that look like in practice? Once you've deployed it and you've configured your connector to your UiPath system or your automation center, you basically get in the workflow tool in process automation, you get this option to call RPA. So you'll see in the screenshot, we've got a simple process that reads some order details from a quote in process automation. We have a message task, a signal task, that is an RPA task. And the RPA task is calling a particular RPA system. In this case, it's called demo application. That's what the connector is configured with. And it passes the request into a queue. And you typically pass an RPA request into a queue so that any robot that is available will pick it up and process it. And you can target a specific robot if you know there's one particular robot that handles these types of requests. But it allows you to configure this activity now, in this case, it's a message activity, to send a request to your RPA tool. And it will pass over a payload with that. And then the second step, or third step in this workflow is a wait on signal. And so that will wait for our RPA REST API to be called by the RPA tool to say, I'm finished, here's the response back. Once we receive that signal, it will then go to the update order quotation step, where that will update process automation's data with the return value from the robot. So it's very easy to integrate. And we see that pattern. That's typically how people work with RPA when they also got process automation. Is most of the process is automated with the process automation tool or the case tool, and there are certain points where you need to interact with maybe a mainframe through a green screen. It has a green screen interface, and that's where this comes into its own. So again, very simple to configure. And, first time probably looks complicated, but once you've done it, it's very straightforward. So that's the kind of the integration topics. Hopefully you can see how easy it is for us to actually really build a fully integrated solution into your IT infrastructure, both automating other systems, orchestrating other systems, but also embedding process automation into your interfaces. So you might want to, for example, integrate the initiation of a process from your company portal. Then it's very easy to do that through our APIs. The other thing I just wanted to touch on as a final topic is around containerized deployments. So we recognize that managing an IT infrastructure these days, it's all changed. Nobody really wants to run infrastructure on premise anymore. You ideally want to simplify things. You want to containerize it, and which brings all sorts of benefits, which I'll touch on in a second. But it allows you also to then host inside the cloud in one of the hyperscaler. So we fully support containerization, have done for a couple of years now. And I just want to touch on it because there's lots of benefits to doing it. So from an Appworks point of view, aside from the regular benefits of auto scaling that you get if you're running in a hyperscaler or Kubernetes type environment, container environment, with the process automation platform itself, if you've ever run it not in a container, you'll notice running into containers, everything runs in the application server. So previously things could run in the app server and things could run in an independent process outside of it. In the container model now, we've moved everything into the application server, which means that everything is running in one space. It helps us reduce memory consumption. It helps us to improve the transactional scope of operations that go across different containers, different services. That also helps in a regular deployment as well, not in container. But it means that if you set up a clustered environment, previously you would have had to maybe define one of the nodes to be heavily focused on doing process tasks and tuned for that. One would be tuned for doing something else. Now every container is identical. You can replicate containers, add another node very easily, scale up, scale down on the fly. Without any extra configuration, but every individual container is optimized. It will only use the resources it needs to use. Also, we simplify the configuration because every setting is now can be stored in a YAML file. That means it's very repeatable. So every time you spin up a system, whether it's a dev test, all of those settings that you would have done manually once you'd installed the software in the classic world is part of a YAML file. So instead of having to go into an admin UI and configure here and configure there and change that setting, and you'd have a 300-page document that would list, when we deploy, we do this, then we do this, then we do this. In containers, it's all in a YAML file. So you configure that YAML file once, and you can just reuse it. And those, we call them intelligent defaults. So if you don't override a setting in the YAML file, we'll set up a default, the most common default. Obviously, there are platform settings, and then if you've built an application, that application has its own configuration as well. So we separate those two, so two separate YAML files. The nice thing with it being in a file is it can be part of your source control, so you can version it, and it's a really nice way of running and deploying the solution. It also means you can automate that deployment really easily. So you can properly set up a CI/CD pipeline to give you very repeatable results. So those are some of the benefits that you get specifically with Appworks process automation in containers. Now, the next obvious question that we get asked is, how do we move then? If we've deployed or have a customer that is already running the software on-premise but wants to move to containers, how do we do that? So key here is that you don't have to move everything. So the database could remain. What we call our CARS server, our kind of configuration server, could remain on-premise, could move into a container as well, but you don't have to. And the steps we recommend are that you upgrade, first of all, your system in place to the newest version. So doing that is the best way to upgrade first in a classic environment, and make sure that everything is configured in the same way that it would be in containers, i.e. everything is running inside the application server in Tommy. There are some old process automation features that aren't supported in containers for various reasons. So the data transformation features, the master data management features, the business activity modeling features are all using really legacy technology that doesn't work well in a container. And so we've not brought that support over. They're not widely used anyway, so typically it's not a problem. But obviously, if you are using those packages, then you can't move to containers. But so make sure that upgrade in place, reorganize that current system so that everything is running in the application server, and check that it works. Remove any unsupported packages that you don't need. Validate that it works. Then you can go and move it to the container. So one thing is that it does need to delete and recreate the document store configuration. So you need to obviously back up your settings. But yeah, so there's a set of steps to go through, and obviously at each step you validate that the application still runs. But yeah, it's perfectly achievable. We have customers doing that today that are moving from a classic deployment to a cloud deployment. And then the final thing I would say is that there's two choices as to how you handle deploying your application to containers. So one option is to take our base image that we publish to the Docker registry, and you download that, extract the base image. You can add all of your solution-specific files to it. That then lets you build a new custom image which you deploy. So that's the kind of that's our original model. However, the newer model that we recommend is to use an init container. Obviously, if you're not familiar with containers, this might sound like gobbledygook. But if you're familiar with containers, you'll understand the difference here is an init container allows you to build a special container that contains all of your customizations, all of your cat files, jars, and things. And it's a separate container that sits alongside the OpenText official container. And when our one starts up, it will read the configuration from the init container and kind of deploy that into the base image. The reason that's a recommended approach now is that it means that our base image that we ship, which we harden and we put through security scans and things, you never change it. There's never any concern that it's a modified version of our image. And so it's a more secure way of deploying your changes into our image. It also means that that init container is fixed, and if we release a new version, you want to upgrade, you upgrade the base image, and your init container doesn't have to change. And so then, but it will carry on working. So it's a really good way of handling application deployment. It's one of the many benefits of using containers. Although there's a whole new learning curve to go on with containerized deployments and using Kubernetes and things, the benefits are huge. So we really recommend you to kind of take time to look at that. So that's kind of what I wanted to go through. Thank you very much for your time. Neha, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Nick. I'm sure everyone found all this information very useful in improving work experience for a knowledge worker and the benefits behind containerized deployment. So I would like to inform you that our next session will be the final one in this webinar series, concluding before the OpenText World event. In that session, we'll explore how to use pro-code tools to enhance the user experience for knowledge workers, how tailored experiences drive productivity, and much more. Stay tuned for the invite. If you haven't already, then please register to attend our annual flagship event, OpenText World in Las Vegas, from November 18th to 21st. This year's conference theme is AI and its revolutionary impact on how organizations approach work. It's a fantastic opportunity to connect with industry experts, engage in meaningful conversation, and share your experiences on stage. We would love to hear your experience and your customers' experience. So please use the speaker form for nomination. We've answered all your questions through the chat window as much as possible. Thank you to our audience for your great participation. If we weren't able to answer your question today, we'll respond directly via email. Please note that a replay of today's event will be available on demand shortly. And of course, we invite you to share it with your colleagues. Thank you to your audience today. This concludes our event. Have a great day.